This is Fight Fans Radio.
Let's get ready to rumble! Oh, my God! Unbelievable! Down goes Frazier! Down goes
Frazier! It's time! You're listening to New Mexico's only mixed martial arts and boxing podcast, The Low Blow, on AtomCombatSports.com and Fight Fans Radio. It is episode 180 of The Low Blow on Fight Fans Radio, SouthwestFight.com, and USCombatSports.com. I am Justin Goodrum, joined by Jorge Hernandez. What's up, man?
What's going on, man? We cut it kind of close today, man. Internet's dropping and us going on right away.
Yeah, technical difficulties. I guess you can kind of point it to, I don't know, this might be a little bit of a stretch, but all this Mount Rushmore discussion is kind of like destroying the internet. And in a good segue, Southwest Fight News has their own article on the Mount Rushmore discussion of New Mexico MMA athletes.
Yeah, but Philip Marcelo there did a good job of actually doing that. And, very interesting. He brought up a lot of topics. Again, Philip Lujan there for Southwest Fight News put his list of the Mount Rushmore of New Mexico MMA. That's a combination of both coaches and actual fighters as well. And that's something I want to talk to you about a little bit later, Jay, as far as my Mount Rushmore of just fighters out of this
cool,
state.
Man. Yeah, it's definitely, with all the talk about LeBron and all the best players in the NBA, it's crossed over every single sport. So MMA shouldn't be left out of the discussion. So we'll discuss that. We'll break down another fight week. It is UFC 170 coming up this weekend, featuring Ronda Rousey against Sarah McMahon. So we'll break that card down, and we'll run down the UFC Fight Night card along with the latest combat sports news. You can get in touch with us through @TheLowBlow. Through Twitter, through Facebook, typing in Low Blow Podcast, and email us at lowblow505@gmail.com. Also, we're on YouTube, youtube.com/lowblow505. We're also on Stitcher, Spreaker, iTunes, and on Podomatic. Also, please follow the Fight Fans Radio Network. They have a great programming there. You can find them on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Ustream, and on Spreaker. I've been promising these interviews, man. I've been totally forgetting. But right after this, I'm going to upload both of the interviews, Van Tate and Austin Trout, discussing Black History Month concerning this, African-American athletes in New Mexico. So both those interviews are either coming like right after I do this or coming up this weekend at the latest. And then hopefully we're going to work on a little bit of something about Bob Foster. We'll have to debate if we're going to put on the entire interview. I think that interview is a good hour long, even longer than that. So maybe we'll put in maybe an edited version, maybe 30 minutes, but I must listen to an interview of Bob Foster. So we'll have that up on our social media sites and excuse me, and maybe some of the audio up on YouTube fairly shortly here. So, man, let's get into it. The standing, a little bit of a slow news week somewhat. So we'll get into the news. Normally named the standing 8 count. And first, we start off with ratings for UFC Fight Night 36. Many people criticizing this card. I wasn't really too excited. If you remember, Jorge, we discussed this. Kind of like a middleweight tournament going on with the top 2 fights. But apparently, fans still into the fights. It averaged 1.4 million viewers. That is the second highest rated Fight Night event in the network's history. The network's only been around for a little bit here, but certainly good numbers for the network. And really it shows how much of a draw Machida is, Bustasi, certainly Jacare. Those guys on there really made a difference. So in terms of television ratings, certainly fans wanted to tune in.
And that was pretty decent because when HBO and Showtime launch their numbers as far as what they do on Saturday nights whenever they have boxing events, anything above a 1.2, 1.3 is viewed as a huge success. So this was obviously very successful in any standard, MMA or boxing. So to your point, I mean, we don't necessarily think of Machida as someone carrying a lot of star power, but either people didn't have much to do that night or they really want to see a Machida fight.
Yeah, exactly. I'm pretty surprised with those numbers, but I think it maybe proves, the silver lining and all this, doom and gloom with the UFC that maybe there is something with Machida. If he catches fire, maybe he can become another draw for the UFC. We'll see.
Oh, definitely. And in other news, how am I coming out okay, Jay?
Yeah, I can still hear you. You're a little bit, you're Skyping, but I can hear you. So keep on going.
All right, in other news, we go to one of the more comical guys in boxing, Brandon Rios. Of course, coming to the defense of his partner and Mikey Garcia. He was quoted as saying this week that Mikey Garcia will stop that, effing little midget, referring to Yorkis Gamboa. So when Brandon Rios, who obviously never holds back when someone asks him a question that involved Yorkis Gamboa, he lost his mind. Rios, he was working out he's working out in the gym after his November loss to Manny Pacquiao, where he was easily defeated. We all know Mikey Garcia and Brandon Rios train with Mikey's brother Robert Garcia at the Robert Garcia Boxing Academy. So those guys are like family. So of course he would come to his aid. So this is going to be very entertaining because Mikey Garcia ain't much of a talker, but Brandon Rios is going to do all the talking for him.
Yeah, Brandon Rios always very eccentric, always a guy. He's not a lack for words, that's for sure. And really, he kind of took a back seat in terms of the Manny Pacquiao fight. He kind of sat back, and his trainers kind of took the trash talk when Freddie Roach, created that situation. So it's good to see, in a way, Brandon Rios come back to form here.
No, it definitely is. See him come back to form, even though he's not in the ring. But Brandon Rios still has some big fights coming up himself.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing that. Titan FC has Elite's roster of new fighters contracted to multi-fight deals, and there's been a lot of discussion in terms of the UFC, somewhat losing fighters, in terms of their because of their new policies. There's been controversy with George St. Pierre, Gilbert Melendez, which we'll discuss later on. But other organizations are up on the rise here. Just listen to some of these fighters on this roster. This ranges from 125 pounds to 170. You got Matt Riddle. You got Brock Dradine. Going down the line here, George Gurgel, Mike Ricci. There's some pretty decent fighters on here. Jeff Curran. That's ranging from 125 to 170 pounds here. This is from the BloodyElbow.com website. And this is according to them. These guys are signed to multi-fight deals. So it's interesting that there's not people portray the sport as in terms of World Series of Fighting, Bellator, and the UFC. There's not a lot of fighters out there, but Titan FC, this is a pretty decent lineup for them starting off here and really leading to their February 28th card. This is not a bad roster of new talent, and Stefan Bonner is going to be named to the commentary team. So Titan FC, an organization that I think, for hardcore MMA fans, you're going to have to keep your eyes out for.
Yeah, no, definitely. And another company that I'm just curious as to what you think, how much noise these companies can actually make, like Titan FC. And another one that comes to mind is Maximum Fighting Championships that also airs on Access TV. Just very interesting that they're developing their rosters, especially. Titan, especially with this, is making a lot of noise.
Yeah, I think if you stick to a niche, I think you could be successful. If you stick regionally, like Legacy's here, mostly in the southwestern area, you've seen, you mentioned MFC, they're basically in Canada. So if you focus in within a region, which you can draw in regional fans, I think you can create a really hardcore fan base. Mike Easton came from the kind of fighting organizations in the DC area and really grew a fan following from there on the East Coast. So I think if you focus it more on a regional promotion, I think you can become very successful. But once you kind of go national and once you want like a major TV deal, I'm not talking about Access TV, but a big TV deal in terms of trying to compete with the big organizations, I think that's a huge risk.
No, and I completely agree. And speaking of risks, we know Weather doesn't take too many of them, but Marcos Maidana, who people might remember for destroying the artist formerly known as Adrian Broner a few months ago, looks like he's still in the hunt to face Floyd Mayweather on May 3rd. Mayweather's closing in on a couple of months before he does return in the ring. Usually around this time is when we get word as to who he will be fighting. Maidana, who is apparently not out of the race. It's basically a two-man race between Amir Khan and Marcos Maidana. But, nothing's set in stone yet. There'll probably be several press releases sent out.
Oh.
Yeah. Am I gone?
You're here. I can still hear you.
Okay.
I thought I lost you, but you're still there. You're going good.
No. It's just, as I mentioned, the two-man race. It's a race that I don't know if either guy wants to win, just because they're going to get destroyed, and whoever he actually decides to face. The only thing that I hope is that they build a decent pay-per-view for this, especially if it is Maidana. I mean, Maidana doesn't carry as much star power as Khan. Khan's going to carry an entire country of England with him, so it's going to come down tight, and you can expect here within the next 2 to 3 weeks an opponent officially announced for Floyd.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's going to be really up to if they can put together a pretty decent pay-per-view card for the fans. I think during the last couple of years, I think boxing's done a better job at least of not making it just about the main event. At least putting another main event attraction there to not just top load it with just the main event. So let's get the 2 rounds, man, where yourself and I discussed what's on our minds in mixed martial arts or in boxing. Anything that's really making you angry or anything that's caught your eye this week. We have UFC 170. We have lots of different controversial topics with Dana White. What's really catching your eye?
A couple of things are the fact that McMahon hasn't changed from a 3.5 to 1 underdog through this whole ride ever since they announced the fight. Granted, they announced the fight, what was it, maybe 3-4 weeks ago that they said that this fight was going to go down? Maybe a little bit more.
Correct.
But, it was a quick turnaround. The odds haven't shifted at all, so I think Vegas is pretty comfortable that Ronda Rousey is going to win this fight. So I think that specifically is what weighing on my mind. Another thing is Legacy tomorrow is going to have a few guys here from the Albuquerque area training, among them Damasio Page, as well as Hunter Tucker, who's another guy. Another guy that people should keep an eye out on is Phil Haas. He did wrestle out in the Midwest. He's actually training with Carlos Condit now, kind of a Tyrone Woodley type of build. So it'll be very interesting to see how he plays out, one of the newcomers in Jackson's MMA. So a couple of things. One that I've noticed lately and I'm looking forward to here come tomorrow night when it does come to those legacy fights.
I want to run something by you, Jorge, and I know
Sure.
I had this further down on the rundown, but I want to talk about it now. And that's I mentioned, wrestling before, but this pertains to, if you're a combat sports fan, I think you should be paying attention to the story. The WWE Network launches next week. Now, basically, this network is unprecedented in history, and I don't know if you know this, Jorge, but they're basically offering all their pay-per-views on this network. So if you pay $9.99 a month, like Netflix, you can get all of the WWE pay-per-views. So they do a pay-per-view once a month. So you get that pay-per-view in the subscription. So you pay for a 6-month commitment. It's about $120. I think, what is it? I know it's $60. I think it's like $60 for 6 months, and you get 6 months worth of pay-per-views along with the rest of the WWE, their whole entire library of shows. Kind of similarly to UFC Fight Pass, only WWE Network's putting all of their stuff on here. Basically, there won't be Raw, SmackDown, whatever. And my point is that this is eliminating the middleman. I don't know if you've been following this story, but not DirecTV, but Dish Network won't be carrying the pay-per-view this weekend. And so if they've made their intentions known that they're not happy about this network, because WWE is getting 100% of the revenue from their subscriber base. So if the UFC is paying attention to the story, certainly they're going to be of interest in terms of if WWE Network is successful. I mean, if the network's getting a bunch of subscribers, I mean, the UFC, even though they're making a lot of money, still on regular pay-per-view, if they go to an all-digital model and just up the ante a little bit and just offer all the pay-per-views online, they can take in all that revenue when they get their million pay-per-view buys, for their big shows once, 2 times a year. They get all that money instead of trying to split it with DirecTV, with Dish, with Comcast. They get all that money. So this is fairly interesting. HBO Go, that's another kind of experiment too. I mean, they could start offering, boxing pay-per-views. I mean, imagine Floyd Mayweather, or, Showtime with their app. I mean, this fight that we haven't discussed yet, but you've been discussing with me earlier today about Canelo fighting Miguel Cotto on HBO. If they put that fight on pay-per-view through HBO Go and they eliminate all the cable partners, they get 100% of that revenue. Of course, we run the risk of people not wanting to, watch a pay-per-view on the internet. But if you make it easy through, a Roku box or an Apple TV, I mean, it's awfully easy to order it in HD through there than through your cable provider. So what's your opinion on this, Jorge? Basically, would you be inclined to just, eliminate the middleman and take out the cable providers? Digital media is changing nowadays. What do you think about this new situation? Or do you think the WWE Network won't have too much of an effect on the rest of the fight world?
Man, it's definitely a good, I guess, blueprint to follow, especially if they're successful. If they are successful for themselves and they can cut out the major cable providers, then it'd be incredible for them. But here's the thing where they don't want to break those bonds is, their weekly productions make them tons of money just based off of ad revenue. So who knows how much they're able to make off of that. So just very interesting to see how this is going to play out. How much are wrestling pay-per-views nowadays?
It's $60 for HD.
$60 for HD, so it's on par with, I guess, a regular, boxing's about $60, around there, $62, $63. Mm-hmm. UFC is around the same price, so wow, it's unbelievable. I think as far as boxing, I think boxing's way behind something like this, to be honest. The UFC, if it is between one of the two sports that'll follow suit, it'll definitely be the UFC. The UFC is about 5-6 years ahead of boxing when it does come to this type of programming. I mean, we saw how Top Rank tries to implement the live streaming before fights, and they haven't developed that too far along. Not all of the fights have those pre-fight prelim streams. So I think, boxing, if we see it, we won't see it for another 8, 9, 10 years, I don't think. But, don't be surprised if you see this with the UFC right around the corner, especially if it makes money. If it makes money, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, the other issue is if the technology works. I mean, I've ordered all kinds of pay-per-views online. Invicta, I mean, compared to watching it on a cable or on, satellite, unless the weather sucks, I mean, for the most part, it's going to work. But with the internet, I mean, there's a chance it might. And I think, getting a pay-per-view before on the internet, it was cheaper. So that'd be the reason why you would go with the internet pay-per-view. But within the last 2 to 3 years, I mean, the technology's kind of spotty. I mean, even with the last UFC, UFC 169, I had ran into some problems, and that was I had Apple TV. There were some buffering issues. I have the Samsung Smart TV. There's an app on there that didn't work, kinda. And I don't know if that is my own internet connection, but still, there was a little bit of problems there. So, we have to see if the technology works because people, especially if they're not inclined to technology, they'll just be really turned off and not want to order the pay-per-view at all.
No, and I completely agree with you as far as the streaming problems that we've seen in the past. It's just, like you said, the internet's just a whole different animal, and you can't control, what providers there on that end are able to do as well. But, good old TV has been reliable, man.
It's true. I mean, I don't know. The television media, it's so confusing now because, I mean, in terms of an HD signal, I mean, I have regular cable now, and the cable provider charges more money for an HD stream. But with your own cable subscription, you can watch HD ESPN, through Apple TV, and you don't need to pay the extra money per month. And yet, this is not like you're stealing it. This is the cable provider providing this for you. So it's just very confusing for the consumer. Why I should pay this? Why I should pay that? It's just really, pretty crazy how television is. And hopefully, in 2014, it'll be straightened out. So,
yeah. And one more thing, I guess, was just because I wanted to bring something up. It was something that when we first started the show, Jay, that we were thinking of bringing. And since it is Thursday, I guess I can do a throwback kind of Thursday deal for people here. But there was a fight that I had never seen before that I actually, tuned into last night. Every once in a while, my dad and I will get together and just watch one old fight. It's once, twice a month. It's the only time we really bond. So I watched Roberto Duran against Iran Barkley, man. This was when Duran, went up to 160 pounds. It was one hell of a fight. I watched it. I thought Barkley won by a point. At worst, it was a draw. But this fight was a war. I'd always heard people talking about it, but unbelievable, the tide toward the end of the fight that was happening. That's something I'm going to post up on the Low Blow page, man, just as a little throwback Thursday for today.
Cool, man. Yeah, I think you were doing that years ago. I think I remember you posting those old fights on there. I mean, YouTube, even though they kind of cracked down on like the copyright stuff, you can still see tons of fights on there.
Yep.
Basically, from the 80s, on down, as long as you kind of avoid like the pay-per-view stuff, and even then, like Tyson Holyfield with the air biting incident, that's on there. But anything kind of post, I don't know, like 2005, further on down, you can pretty much see on YouTube. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and one major story before we break down, I guess, the UFC card in a little bit,
sure.
Or the other topics, is the fact that Miguel Cotto and Sergio Martinez, it was made official today in a fight that's going to be huge just because of what Miguel Cotto's been able to do through divisions. He's a 3-division title holder. He's going to try to become a 4-division title holder when he does face Sergio Martinez. That's going down June 7th on HBO pay-per-view at Madison Square Garden. That is a pretty big fight just because both guys are obviously a little bit past their primes. So for this fight to happen, 160-pound title on the line, we'll see what Miguel Cotto is able to do at that weight, especially now that he's training with Freddie Roach. It's a little bit of a hike, but it's things that I just mentioned Roberto Duran was able to do. He was able to go up through weight classes as he aged, and here we see Miguel Cotto. We'll see what type of firepower Miguel Cotto will have at 160 pounds, but it's a fight I know boxing fans have been wanting, and if it wasn't Canelo against one of these guys, this is one of the top 4 fights you can make in boxing right now, I think.
Yeah, this is a fantastic fight. I think the bummer is that both guys aren't really eccentric personalities.
Yeah.
So I think they might get disrespected in terms of the casual fan. They might be kind of bored in terms of, where's the fight hype. But once the guys get into the ring, this could be a fight of the year candidate. If both guys kind of stay healthy, hopefully we'll see a rematch this year. I think that would be great for both of these guys here.
Yeah, and if it is a fight of the year candidate, you can bet that at the later half of the year, you'll definitely see this rematch. And Jay, people feel that this fight is a toss-up. I'm looking at ESPN Sports Nation poll right now. It's 25% all the way down as far as the 4 different scenarios that can happen. Cotto by KO, Cotto by decision, Martinez by KO, or Martinez by decision. It's all even, dude. 25% going all the way down, and it's got about a couple of thousand votes. So people are excited about this fight if they think it's this even.
Yeah, the atmosphere will be crazy too. Basically, when Miguel Cotto fights in Madison Square Garden, it's like a New York Knicks game. It's like, or this home court advantage, Miguel Cotto has that all the way. So I think easily the crowd will be favoring Miguel Cotto. We'll have to see if that can pull him through a victory here.
No, and it'll be huge to see him return back to the Garden.
No doubt. Let's run down this UFC Fight Night 36 card real quickly. Top 2 fights. We see Machida getting the victory, unanimous decision over Gegard Mousasi, and then Jacare Ronaldo Souza getting a unanimous decision victory over Francis Garmon. Really a night of all really split decisions here. Another night kind of struggling through things. We're kind of in a lull of fights. It's so funny. When the UFC is putting on spectacular cards, no one's really praising the UFC. They're kind of like, yeah, it's kind of standard. But once the cards, we see a bunch of unanimous decisions, the outrage is all over the internet. So hopefully people just stop freaking out. And, I'm sure, once UFC 170 comes around, maybe there'll be a change in terms of how the fights go. But in terms of Machida and Jacare Souza, where do you see them fitting in a middleweight division? Machida, it was a good performance by him, but not something that was certainly earth-shattering or something that's going to put him in the middleweight contention in terms of a title shot. Where do you see Machida in the middleweight division? Right now you have Belfort fighting Chris Weidman. I mean, if Weidman loses, that's probably going to be a rematch. Where do you see Lyoto Machida falling in that kind of, top 4 of the middleweight division?
Wouldn't the ideal thing would be to have these two guys fight? You think they'd ever do that?
Who?
Jacare and Machida.
That'd be ideal. I'm not really hip on if they're teammates or not, or what is kind of their affiliation. That'd be a great fight. I think the bad thing possibly what would happen is, Machida running away from Jacare and just, Machida hitting Jacare with leg kicks and you get another boring decision. I mean, that would be my worst fear.
I'm picturing Jacare just walking around like a crocodile up the ring, just chasing Machida around the ring, man. It's pretty comical in my head, but
yeah.
I mean, you think about some of the guys on there. Silva's obviously out of the question. So you got, as far as the next contender, Belfort, he's taken care of. After these two guys, you got Bisping, Rockhold, and Mark Munoz. Doesn't make sense. The only thing I think that makes the most sense is maybe a Jacare-Tim Kennedy fight.
Yeah, they fought in Strikeforce.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to see that fight again. And this weight class is top heavy, dude. If you ask me, it's very top heavy. And as far as everyone else after the 6th ranking besides Kennedy is, I don't see a whole lot unless Rockhold fights one of these guys. It's just very difficult to gauge what is actually going to happen next. Bisping's kind of sitting like an odd man out there without having the opportunity to put himself in title contention just because of who's above him.
Sure, but I think honestly with Michael Bisping, with his fan base and he is a draw. I mean, if he can just get 2 impressive wins, he's in a title picture. As long as he can stay healthy. What factors in with, guys getting a title shot. That's how well they can draw and how well they can hype up a fight. That's Michael Bisping. So the door is open for him right now. If I'm Michael Bisping, I'm salivating right now. This is the biggest chance of his career to fight for the title without Anderson Silva. I know his dream was to fight Silva, in England. But honestly, with him gone, it's a blessing for him.
And Bisping, to be honest, might be the most marketable guy out of anyone in that damn division.
Sure.
I'm looking at it now, and anyone stand out. I mean, maybe Tim Kennedy because of his whole military background and because he's a funny guy in all his videos. But I mean, Bisping, just because of how loudmouth he is, that'd be he'd be the only one to actually advertise this fight the way it should be, I guess.
Yeah. I agree with you completely. I guess let's move on. Let's discuss this real quickly. I guess not real quickly because I guess this is kind of a big topic. And I guess this runs the gambit. This is not just an issue of one particular story. I think it's kind of a domino effect, and I guess it starts with Gilbert Melendez. Officially, hopefully, well, he's in negotiations. I don't want to jump ahead here, but he's in negotiations to sign with Bellator MMA. He got offered a deal by Bellator. The UFC has a right to match. For right now, we don't really know if the UFC is going to match that deal, but Bellator's trying to sign him. If he does sign with Bellator, they're hopefully going to have him fight in the spring sometime. This would be the first time a major fighter's jumped ship from the UFC since Dan Henderson moved to Strikeforce. Do you see other fighters following Gilbert Melendez's lead here, not just because of the money, but just because of the recent, turn of events the last, I'd say 6 months, George St. Pierre leaving and him bashing the UFC. This constant, bashing of Alistair Overeem by Dana White. The issues of uniforms with all the fighters. There's been really those have been kind of rumors for now, but I think that's possibly true from what Dana White's been saying the past couple of months in terms of sponsors and trying to straighten that out. Also, there's this story that's been circling around here, and I really need to read this, but it's been circling around here with Nate Quarry about him bringing up a bunch of allegations, him bashing the UFC. So do you see kind of like a mass kind of exodus here? Guys, really being fed up with the UFC and trying to go to, another organization thinking the grass is greener on the other side.
Sure. I mean, as far as a mass exodus by, a bunch of these guys, it'll be lower tier guys. It won't be, I don't think we'll see 3 guys in the top, let's say 30 leave the organization such as that. I mean, it might be little by little some middle of the pack guys in each division that, you know, they could possibly turn to the other promotions, especially if they're paying it for them. And, you know, obviously we talked about these other promotions are being broadcasted on television. And if Bellator keeps taking these guys away, they're going to bring in a lot of TV money and a lot of ad money, which means, guess what? That they can pay the guys more and maybe, if not exceed, maybe comparable cash that the UFC is actually paying these guys. So, I mean, the UFC better be careful. They'll always be the top dog. They'll never do anything as long as Dana White is one of the heads there. They'll never, I don't think, be threatened to be overtaken as, you know, move down to the number 2 slot. But the number 2 and number 3 promotions that are coming up will likely make a push for a lot of these guys, especially. And you know, that's the thing with boxing. Things like this wouldn't necessarily happen because there's no monitoring body and there's like 4 belts in every division. So the guys don't have to vibe, you know, and sit in 14th, 15th, 16th place ranked in each division and wait a year and a half, 4 or 5 years to ever fight for a title. So it's interesting how this has played out so far with Melendez. I mean, the UFC obviously still has him in his rankings, so until he leaves, they're not going to bump him off of there. So that's something that I've been doing. It's my Melendez UFC rankings watch. As soon as he's taken off of there, that's when you know it's official and he's gone.
Well, this is so weird because, you know, Viacom, you know, has bought Bellator, but yet they haven't put down really a huge amount of money to really go after a lot of big guys. I mean, take a look at Rampage and King Mo. I mean, those were joint deals with pro wrestling, with a pro wrestling organization, with Impact Wrestling. It wasn't like Bellator just signed him just to be MMA fighters. I mean, Impact put up some of the money too. So this seems, you know, it seems kind of weird that now they're stepping up and trying to match deals here with the money. Now, another issue is just with the UFC with Dana White. Dana White is a very emotional person, and I think that's what we love about him, but also it comes back to bite him at times. He's not a business guy, and if you watch any of the interviews with him describing his history, I mean, this is a guy who grew up in the mean streets of Boston, in Las Vegas, got in tons of fights. He was a bellman. He was a boxing instructor. This guy has no background in business and really no background in dealing with, you know, a roster full of guys here who are maybe insecure about their fighting ability. And if you compare that to someone like David Stern in the NBA, who was a lawyer, who knew how to kind of use his words carefully, you've heard, you know, you're a basketball fan, Jorge. I mean, with David Stern, he's been very frank about his opinions, you know, over the years, but you would never hear David Stern, you know, let's say LeBron James, you know, the whole decision thing. You would never hear David Stern say, LeBron James is a punk for going to Miami. Look at the coward, or just bash him. Like, you would never hear David Stern say that. If Dana White was running the NBA, you might hear Dana White bash LeBron James. And I think right now, with the organization as it is, with the UFC being a $1 billion company, you know, I think Dana White needs to kind of reflect and just look in the mirror and just kind of use his words more carefully.
No, and I agree with you. He just has to be careful because you just never know what you're going to do to offend a certain guy. Because if you start offending superstars, man, I mean, there's no turning back after that.
Excuse me. Yeah, I agree. If you look at George St. Pierre, I mean, he was very hurt about the comments that Dana White made. You know, Dana White's made comments about Alistair Overeem, you know, the comments about Randy Couture. You know, guys don't want to hear that. You know, Dana White is part fight fan, part fight promoter, and those lines get kind of blurred, and it sometimes causes trouble.
No, you're going to say it does cause trouble, and I think a lot of the promoters in, I guess, the smaller divisions, or smaller promotions, I should say, a lot of them are. You get to see how they act with their, you know, I guess they treat their fighters as colleagues, and a lot of the times we don't see that with Dana White. Obviously, he's their boss, but you know, we just don't see a very nice Dana White when it does come to his fighters. He does treat these guys like they're his product, and you know, as he should. But I mean, there's a space that you just shouldn't, you know, you shouldn't violate, and he does it a lot of the damn time.
Well, I mean, there's no problem in treating with their products, but you don't bash.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yep,
there's a relationship there. Like you have to work together. And I think with the problem with the fighters, and this is kind of in a way the fighters' fault in the way they're saying, oh, fighters can't work together to form a union. And now, to me, I think they have to form some kind of a union now, not for money's sake, for at least for like rights, at least for standing up to. At least having some kind of dialogue with the management in terms of discussing different avenues to how they're living as fighters, because it is difficult. And I just think it sometimes turns into no man's land where I think MMA, you're a roster and you're subjected to the same types of treatment compared to boxing where it's just all over the map. So the fighters really have to get their acts together. Maybe, George St. Pierre could be the guy that kind of breaks that barrier there. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, no, and as far as GSP, I mean, he'd be one of the guys to be able to do this. I think only a few guys in the UFC would be able to have that type of, I guess, impact. It'd be him, Silva's another guy, and Jones is the other guy, obviously.
Yeah, I agree with you. One last topic, and that's UFC 170 this weekend. Of course, major bummer. Rashad Evans, injuring his knee. Excuse me. I think last week we said he's going to be only out 4 to 6 weeks, but he's going to be out 6 months. So much for Rashad. Daniel Cormier fights Patrick Cummings. Rory McDonald fights Damian Maia, and Ronda Rousey fights Sarah McMahon. Now, when this card was announced, the UFC 169, I would have told you I'm buying this card. Now, I'm not exactly sure, especially in our neck of the woods with UNM playing San Diego State in the pit. This card's really not lighting the world on fire in terms of hype. Are you excited at all at this card, or are you inclined to watch the Lobo game on Saturday? Since you're a basketball fan,
I'm watching that game, man. It's just and I'd be inclined because that Cormier Evans fight was so damn compelling, man.
It was. Yeah.
It was just like you didn't know what was going to happen in that fight. To me, that fight was a toss up.
Sure.
Unless Rashad got caught, we know he has a suspect chin. It was honestly a toss-up. But now when you see these fights now, let me give you the odds that are going out right now. The Cormier-Cummins fight. Cormier is as high as a 13-1 favorite in some sports books, man.
I'm not surprised.
And then as he probably should be. And Cummins is as high as a 9-1 underdog. In some casinos have him 6-1, which isn't too bad. A guy coming in on 3.5 weeks notice that he came in, I think. Mm-hmm. And then Rousey and McMahon. You got a 4-1 favorite against a 3-1 underdog. So I don't know if we'll see very competitive matchups in this contest. It's the Rory McDonald Damian Maia fight. That might turn some heads as far as what happens, but the car is not stacked to where it was. It went from a B card as far as I was concerned to about a CC minus, man.
I agree. I think the problem is, and I have to admit, I was on the opposing side of the discussion of oversaturation, but just imagine, really, if you just kept the international cards, that's not really the issue, because the international cards have all the foreign fighters, and those fighters is for the fans in the stands, and you're just trying to expose the product. That's not really the issue. The problem is that these fight night cards in the middle of the week, that's causing the issue, because if you don't have the fight night card in the middle of the week, you put the Machida fight on here, you put the Jacare fight on here, both of them, or at least one of them. This card's pretty decent, even with Evans getting hurt. But now those fights have to go on the Fight Night card on Fox Sports 1, and you're left with a mediocre pay-per-view. To me, the Daniel Cormier-Patrick Cummings fight is a disgrace. This fight's a joke. The hype is a joke. Daniel Cormier, I don't know if you saw this, he pushed Patrick Cummings in the press conference. It's a circus. One thing I will say, Cormier looks good. He says he's at 208, so he's going to make weight unless something horrible happens. He looks way skinnier. You see it in his face and his body. He looks good. But, this fight's a joke, and how the UFC allowed this to happen is beyond my comprehension. This card's going to bomb no matter what, Cormier being on there or not. I I think the only person to save it's Ronda Rousey. Really, there's been limited promotion for this card. I mean, I haven't seen Rousey on ESPN. I haven't seen her really on Fox Sports 1. There's been no kind of blitz for her on the major networks in terms of this fight, considering the Olympics are happening right now. The promotion's been really poor. I guess let's get to predictions here. I said it here that I think this fight's going to be a blowout, and I still think the same thing, especially seeing Rousey's jiu-jitsu against Miesha Tate. She dominated McMahon on the ground. Dominated Miesha Tate on the ground from the top, from the bottom. Do you see any type of chance Sarah McMahon pulls off the upset?
It's going to be very tough, man. I mean, because she doesn't have many knockouts when it does come to... I mean, and that's with, I guess, respect to WMMA as a whole. You really don't see too many knockouts, or
you don't.
But TKO stoppages, of course, they are possible. And do I think McMahon can catch Ronda Rousey, whose stand-up is somewhat improving? It's just she's got to move that damn head. And I'm referring to Rousey, but. You know, I was hype about this about a month and a half ago, and I was thinking that McMahon would win this fight, but
you were, yeah, man, you're on the bandwagon.
Rousey is, you know, her like I've been watching these videos, and her stand-up, her striking is on point. It's getting a lot better. It's just the head movement that worries me about Rousey. But we've never really seen her chin tested. Miesha Tate was able to land some jabs up the middle. Here's the thing. If McMahon is able to land jabs to set up takedowns, I think she's going to beat her.
Really?
It has to be the jab.
She could be that dominant on the ground for Ronda Rousey to not have any chance for submissions, no sweeps, no nothing?
I think if she's... I think that the jab's going to go a long way here, because Miesha Tate, some of those jabs were extremely slow, Jay, and they were landing up the middle on Rousey. So
true.
If McMahon has any type of striking, you know, and she's okay. I mean, she's not among the best in the sport. Obviously, she's primarily a wrestler, has 3 submissions, only one stoppage. Man, I really want to pick McMahon, Jay, but that's because, you know, Rousey, I feel, isn't as invincible as, you know, most people put her to be. So, you know what, Jay? I'm going to stick with my first instinct. What the hell? I'm going to pick McMahon by something crazy, a punch up the middle, man. I think if she's able to land a jab and take her down, she might be able to stop her with ground and pound. It's as crazy as it sounds. That's what I'm going with.
That's the UFC's worst nightmare. I mean, they wanted to fight 3 times in 2014, man.
Could you imagine the worst selling pay-per-view that Rousey is on is the one that she loses on?
It's true.
That'd be unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, and I still see this pay-per-view doing decently just because Ronda's on it. Like, it's not going to be a disastrous 150,000 pay-per-view. I just don't see that happening. But, you know, 350, I think that's,
you think so?
Yeah.
I was just going to give you 275 as the over-under. So you're obviously going over.
I think we'll see tomorrow. I think, you know, Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer has a really great point in terms of, you know, we don't really know of the hype until the 2 days. I mean, he's seen pay-per-views which had 0 hype until Friday, and all of a sudden the floodgates open and the pay-per-view does surprisingly well. So you never know tomorrow. You know, this whole Patrick Cummings, Daniel Cormier fiasco, people are attracted to freak shows, so... You know, people you see this like, yeah, you know, Ronda's fighting. You see, you know, co-main event. You know, this Olympian Daniel Cormier against this guy he hates. You know, I'll buy it. You know, maybe that'll work. We'll see. But certainly the hype has been pretty poor for this fight. That's for sure.
It definitely has. And Jay, you know, if we did what we said at the beginning of the year we were going to do and kept track of all these predictions that we've made. I know we've done a terrible job. Yeah, I probably wouldn't be picking McMahon, to be honest. If this were a fantasy league, I probably would not be picking McMahon, but I'm going to do it just I'm going to do it just to go against everybody else. And if she's able to establish the jab, man, I think she has a pretty damn good chance in this. But you think Rousey by armbar?
Yeah, man. I just think the way she looked on the ground was incredible. I mean, maybe I'm overhyping it, but it's like, you know, the old cliche, bringing a knife to a gunfight, man. And I just don't see her unless she's like Tito Ortiz and like smashes Rousey. I don't see it happening. I say triangle armbar for Rousey.
Ooh. All right, you're going triangle. I'm going ground and pound for McMahon. What the hell? Who do you get? A main event? I don't even think a co-main. I should say. I don't even think this is a question.
Cormier by embarrassment. This will be like the James Toney fight.
All right, hey McDonald Maya. I mean, I'm telling you, this fight is a lot closer than people think.
It's a good fight. I think it depends which Rory McDonald shows up. If the Rory McDonald that we thought was going to be the heir apparent to the welterweight division shows up in the octagon, he wins. And I think he might even finish Damian Maia. If he underestimates Maia and he fights a C fight, he's going to lose. So, to me, if he's aggressive, which I think he should be motivated, I say McDonald comes motivated. I say he wins by second round finish.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The Jake Shields Damian Maia fight that happened last year, is that the fight where was that one? I think where we talked about Maia possibly getting robbed. Was that it?
I think you're thinking of Tyrone Woodley and Jake Fink.
Yes. Okay, yes, it was backwards.
But both fights sucked anyway, so, I mean, tomato, man.
Yeah.
But on this card also, Mike Piles fighting TJ Wahlberger. Steven to Wonder Boy Thompson's fighting Robert Whitaker of The Ultimate Fighter. On the Fox Sports 1 card, Alexis Davis is fighting Jessica Ai. A lot of people are wondering why this fight's even taking place in the first place, considering the controversy with Jessica Ai. Also, why this fight wasn't moved to the main card, considering the whole fiasco with Daniel Cormier and Patrick Cummings. Does the Davis-Ai fight capture your attention at all?
Not really. It's like you said, maybe it should have been put there on the main card, but it's a big fight. You know, I shouldn't say that it doesn't capture my eye because you had two. Anytime you have two top 5 fighters in a division taking on each other, it should be a big deal. Yeah. So I mean, not just because of the drama, but because they are among the best in that division, then it should be an interesting one. As you know, I won't be surprised if, you know, obviously on the undercard, I won't blame the prelims if that's one of the better fights. But overall, man, it's just I don't know. This is just a very strange card.
It is, yeah. So with that,
to say the least.
Yeah, for real. We're going to say goodbye. Anything else you wanted to add, man, before we wrap it up for this week?
Nope. I've been editing, and my editing software has been stubborn as far as the Bob Foster interviews. But I promise, even if it's something short, between 5 and 7 minutes, I'll have a story up here within the next week. And next week, Jay, forgot to tell you, I'll actually be out of town at a conference. So
cool.
There you have it.
So we'll be off next week then, and we'll be back right after. If any breaking news happens, I'll probably do a special episode, 10, 15 minutes long. But otherwise, I guess we'll see you in 2 weeks, right?
Yep. No, we will see you all in 2 weeks. Enjoy the fights.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, you can get in touch with Fight Fans Radio through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Ustream. You can follow us on Twitter through @TheLowBlow, and also watch our videos on YouTube, youtube.com/LowBlow505. We're on Stitcher, we're on Spreaker, iTunes, and on Podomatic. The Van Tate interview, the Austin Trout interviews, those are coming within the next couple of days. Be on the lookout for that. So for Jorge Hernandez, I'm Justin Goodrum. You've been listening to episode 180 of The Low Blow. We will see you in 2 weeks. Have a good couple of weeks. See you later.
Peace.